One of the names frequently mentioned in any story about the Trump campaign's alleged connections to Russia is former campaign advisor Carter Page. Mr. Page joins us now. It is good to have you on New Day. What do you make of Mr. Dionne's assessment?
Well, it's sort of a glass half full perspective, Chris. If you look at it from the opposite viewpoint, consider the complete lack of information and the complete lies that have been out there throughout the first 100 days of this new administration, all based on false evidence, complete lies, going back to the dodgy dossier, which was put out on January 10th, and in full disclosure there. So
you like dodgy dossier. That's a catchphrase of yours. We do know that some of the allegations, as you know the history here, CNN talked about the disclosure of the dossier, not the contents thereof, because we couldn't vet them for ourselves. But over time, we've seen some of it has not stood up yet, and others have sources, information such that you were a beneficiary of what is true in that dossier, according to a federal judge who found it as part of the basis for probable cause to have you surveilled. So it's not completely dodgy, right?
Chris, it's incredible that literally every word in there about me, whether it's me actually dealing with Paul Manafort, someone who I've never even talked to, every allegation in there, all the people I've met, each of which are individuals I've never even said hello to in my life, is a complete joke. The main difference, the term dodgy dossier comes from 2003, from another document in from the UK. And the difference here is that in that earlier instance, it led to a complete disaster internationally with thousands of American lives lost and trillions of dollars wasted.
Right, but we've already had our disaster, Carter. We had Russia get involved in our election, upset our political dialogue. We don't know what the far-reaching effects may have been. It's being investigated on numerous levels. And you still haven't explained how a federal judge could look at some of this information about you and make a cause in reviewing the evidence that there was probable cause to surveil you. That's not a nothing burger. That's a federal court. That's assessing evidence.
Chris, there is no probable cause. And that's part of the reason why I'm taking legal action now with the Privacy Act of 1974 legal action, which I'm taking. And I very much look forward to getting disclosure on that warrant application and seeing what exactly was in there. Because, again, there's been terrific reporting in various news outlets, including Washington Post, New York Times, based on various leaks. And some of them have exactly pointed back to that dodgy dossier. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out. Again, there is no probable cause, and there could be no probable cause based on anything I've ever done in Russia or with any Russian person. So let's see what comes out. It'll be interesting to see that full disclosure.
You know, I've spent a lot of time watching your interviews, and sometimes I scratch my head and try to wonder why you're doing them. You are very slow to want to answer questions about the details of your affiliation with the campaign or who you've talked to in Russia and about what. What is your motivation for coming on other than to say you're suing? You don't seem to want to give clarity to the allegations.
Well, it's interesting. One of the prior questions, and this goes back to the issue of leaking, Chris, because in several of the prior discussions, for example, with Anderson Cooper and others, is the constant questions regarding, did I ever meet Ambassador Kislyak? And I said a brief hello to him and in Cleveland, and maybe a few passing comments, never lasting more than just a few seconds. And it's interesting. The reason why I wasn't more forthcoming about that with Anderson about a month and a half ago is it was a confidential meeting. Everyone that was in that meeting agreed they would keep the conversations confidential, and I was respecting that. And so the reason why I can talk about it now is the Kremlin spokesperson, Mr. Peskov, has said that, yes, there were various interactions between the supporters of the Trump campaign as well as the Clinton campaign, I would mention.
But Carter, you know how that plays. It plays as you being deceptive, and there's like a whole list of them now, starting from who brought you into the campaign. You will say, well, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Isn't the truth that really nobody brought you into the campaign. You approached the campaign, and you then were lightly vetted with some other people. You were invited to a meeting. You went to that meeting, and then the affiliation kind of fell off. Isn't that a close reckoning to how you got into the campaign and maintained some contact with some of the members?
Again, Chris, I don't like to discuss confidential dealings or anything.
But that's not
that
confidential.
Well, I don't want to create any issues for people. Again, there's been such a complete firestorm based on this completely false narrative.
But do you
And
have to
really
disrupt
in
that narrative then, Carter? I mean, look, I've heard your answers. I've studied it well. I get what your motivations are in terms of leaking and privacy. But you know, when you don't give answers to what is bothering people, you just pretend and then fuel that speculation even more. You know, another one of them on this is that, you know, you got asked about this in a larger context. Russia, what the intelligence community came to as a conclusion. You say you don't buy it, that you don't buy that Russia interfered with our election, that they helped motivate the WikiLeaks hacks. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, accepts that as reality now. Why don't you?
Chris, part of the main reason is the fact that I've been the victim of one of the most horrendous civil rights violations in recent U.S. election history. And it was interesting watching President Obama's speech at a Chicago university earlier this week, where he was talking about encouraging people to get more involved in the political process, not necessarily being direct politicians and all the dirty things that go along with that, but just as private citizens, which is exactly what I did. And the disclaimer, which should have been on that in that speech that he gave, was make sure that you don't say anything which could be construed as questioning the powers in currently in authority, because then you'll have a domestic political intelligence operation
so correct me if I'm
focused
wrong.
on you.
You think that because you say things in Russia and elsewhere that are negative about American policy, the United States intel services decided to take you down and invaded your privacy and hurt your civil rights in the process? Is that your theory?
Well, again, I'm just basing it on recent reports, Chris, with the fact that the most recent Dodgy dossier of 2016 was used as a false basis, saying that there is probable cause when there is absolutely zero
remember,
probable cause.
A federal judge, you want to make this a political thing, you can, but a federal judge looked at the evidence and found probable cause. And if you look at the facts, they certainly line up in favor of asking you some questions. 2013, you were talking to a guy who you said you didn't know was a spy, turned out to be a spy. Now we have indications that they were working you, whether you were aware or not, trying to get access to the campaign. That's relevant. You then go to Russia. We don't know whether or not the Trump campaign asked you to go, knew that you were going, concerted action with you in going, because you won't say so. It fuels speculation enough such that the DOJ went and got a warrant to surveil you.
Chris, I could talk for hours going through each of the falsehoods that were just outlined. And again, you talk about being unwitting or not really understanding what's going on. I understand, based on all the false evidence and the false narrative that's been out there, the reason why this is the current public perception. Just read that book, Shattered, about the losing
I
campaign.
have, about what happened to Clinton's campaign, right?
Page 395 talks about all the specifics, and that gives a lot of what the major drivers are.
But there's nothing in there about targeting Carter Page unfairly. Everything I just said to you is a fact about who you talked to and how they wound up being Russian operatives and that they say they were trying to work you. And that was the basis of a lot of the speculation. It wasn't simply politics. And we still wind up in the same place, which are people are asking you the same questions. And instead of answering the questions, you talk about bad motivations on the other side. You say that Clinton's coming after you or was coming after you because you're Catholic and male. That doesn't make sense to anybody, does it?
Well, again, if you not directly targeting me, but again, page 395 of Shattered talks about targeting the new administration. And again, you had David Chalian and others talking about polling numbers in this morning, and without question, this cloud, which has been out there for many, many months, going back to even before the election, has been a major drag on the administration.
So,
again, based entirely on lies, Chris.
So if part of your initiative is to be fair to the Trump campaign, then answer some of these questions. Did you ever work with Flynn or know him or communicate with him about Russian policy?
Never. I never had the opportunity to meet him.
Did you ever give the president directly, as candidate or otherwise, advice or guidance about Russian policy?
Never directly, no.
Did you ever coordinate your trip to Russia with any member of the Trump campaign staff or administration?
I was not representing the Trump campaign. I was there as a private citizen, again, along the lines of what President Obama suggested, being active in politics or in political issues, but I was not representing anyone other than myself and my own private views.
Did
So,
you
completely not.
coordinate or communicate the details of your trip or that you were going with any member of the Trump campaign or administration?
I never, again, none of those details. They knew I was going, but nothing was.
How did they know?
It was, again, I don't talk about internal discussions.
But it matters. It matters because the suggestion is they knew you were going. If they knew you were going, they must have had an interest in you going. If they had an interest in you going, did they coordinate anything that you said there, which was inherently destructive to American policy?
Absolutely not. And nothing I said was destructive to American policy, Chris.
Well, you
I was
agreed with the
talking about
Russian
mutual-
reckoning that America has been condescending and on the wrong track where Russia is involved. That is not just the opposite of what American policy is, but it is also critical and attacking of the current state of play.
I think that's an overstatement, Chris. I actually was focusing on mutual respect and how a new approach in foreign policy could have a positive impact on the future of U.S.'s position in the world. This was a very pro-American speech, having a better approach to
the language does
world.
not read pro-Russian, and you know that no matter what your intentions might have been. On the Russian side, they say your being a known advisor to the president was a major factor in extending the invitation. Were you aware of that?
No, listen, I think you're probably referring to a comment by one of the media people at the university.
Right.
Again, I've spoken at major Russian universities going back over a decade about my research, so there was nothing out of the ordinary. And really, the whole media firestorm
Let's not move past that
on the
quickly.
U.S. side.
The person said it for a reason. What I'm saying is, do you think it's not true that they thought you were a Trump advisor and then that was part of the appeal in having you come to that particular university?
It may have been part of the interest, but I think, it's a.
But if it was part of the interest, here's why I'm
ideas.
asking. Here's why I'm asking. If you acknowledge that this is what the media person said and it was part of the interest, didn't you have a responsibility to say to them, don't invite me to the university if you're doing it because I'm a Trump advisor, because I'm not. I was at one meeting. I sent them some emails. I don't have any access to the president. I'm not a policy advisor. But you didn't say any of those things.
No, and actually, no, to the contrary, Chris. I was very clear on multiple occasions that, again, I am just there as a private citizen, and this is not a major driver as to the reason why I'm there, or I'm just talking about my research and things I've done over a long time. And I think in general, last year, there was an interest in U.S. perspectives in general, and whether any affiliations I may have had on the side, just as a informal, unpaid advisor, which I made very clear to them throughout, was not a factor. And again, it's a big distraction from the real crimes and the real influence on the election, which was the civil rights violations and a lot of the exact approaches with the propaganda which went into this, and not only feeding false information to the private media media institutions like CNN, but even government propaganda networks in the U.S., such as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which recited information from the Dodgy dossier in going from September through November.
Well, but
and again,
that's
this
because
is $100 million. This is $100 million a year taxpayer-funded initiative. So.
Well, but remember, there are sources within our intelligence agencies that are looking at the information in the dossier, and they have found some of it to be credible and reliable. And that's what has been leaking out. You know, at the end of the day, a leak is only as good as the truth of what comes out of it. That is what's going to be assessed here. Carter Page, appreciate your side of the story.
Thanks, Chris.